Continue. All right, it is 5:30 and the special meeting of December 1st, 2020 of the Cupertino City Council is called to order. We have one item, a study session on the Climate Action Plan 2.0 initial draft goals and vision statement. We need the roll call. Madam City Clerk, we have the roll call, please.
Councilmember Chow.
Aye. Here.
Member Sinks.
Here.
Councilmember Willie. Vice Mayor Paul.
Here.
Mayor Sharp.
Here. Okay, so we have one item on the special meeting, a study session on the Climate Action Plan 2.0 initial draft goals and vision statement. So may we have the staff report, please?
Hello, Mayor and Council. Good evening. Thanks for having me. Andre Dervort, Sustainability Manager. I'm going to pull up a short presentation here to supplement the staff report that was in the packet for today. And hopefully no tech issues here. This should be coming up shortly. Are we live?
We are.
Thank you. Okay, great. So the study session today is really to discuss the first steps of our update to the Climate Action Plan from 2015. Part of our city work program for this year is to initiate the process of our CAP to update it consistent with some of the recent progress we've made and some of the state legislation that has occurred since our previous Climate Action Plan. So today I want to discuss the topic of the vision statement of that's really a set of guiding principles that we'll be taking as we go through the update process, as well as we want to introduce a few new concepts that have come into the lexicon over the last 5 years of climate action. We'll do a brief review of our progress to date in our greenhouse gas emissions and implementing our existing climate action plan. And then we would like to have a discussion and public comment around the setting of goals. This is just an initial discussion and some draft goals that we would like feedback on. And this will be really valuable as we go into the process of performing technical analysis and public engagement, which is we'll go over some of the timelines as well. What you're seeing in the staff report as well, I'll just mention that this discussion was held over the last 2 Sustainability Commission meetings, along with some public input. So what you're seeing in terms of the goals has been discussed and represents a recommendation from the Commission as well. So just starting briefly on some background and some of the related state policies, I'll try to get through this pretty quickly so that we have plenty of time for discussion. The real key thing here that we're looking at is our climate action plan, which was adopted by the City Council in 2015 or 2016 actually was the actual adoption. That took about 2 years to create through a really robust public engagement process. The relevant policy there is AB 32, which directs cities and local agencies to develop a greenhouse gas emissions target and community-wide strategies to meet those targets. A couple other things I wanted to highlight since then. The first is the climate emergency resolution that City Council took up in 2018 that really speeds up some of the initiatives and process to implement our climate action plan and really aligns the city of Cupertino on what you could call an emergency footing with implementation of climate action and addressing greenhouse gas emissions. The city's zero waste policy in 2017 set a goal for us of reaching 80% diversion rate away from the landfills by 2025. We're pretty close to that target, and so we'll discuss a little bit setting a zero waste goal of 90% by 2030 and related plans to get us there. And we also have been signatory to a couple of voluntary organizations. The first one is known as the Climate Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. This is the one of the mechanisms by which we report our greenhouse gas emissions publicly. So you can see on on their website our greenhouse gas emissions, and we follow all of their protocols for calculating and reporting out our emissions. So that really sets the technical standard for how we account for our emissions. And the other one is the We Are Still In Declaration, which is related to the International Paris Climate Accords. In the wake of the U.S. pulling out of that agreement, a lot of subnational organizations, cities, counties, agencies signed on to this letter saying we are still in, essentially keeping us aligned with the Paris Climate Accords and the various targets that set us on a pathway, really trying aligning with the our emissions targets with the scientific consensus to try to keep our world from going beyond 2 degrees Celsius warming on a global basis. So that's some of the scientific basis. We can discuss that in more detail if you'd like. A couple relevant California pieces of law that I'd like to highlight here is I already mentioned AB 32, which really is the law requiring the creation of greenhouse gas reduction plan. The new one that I'll spend a little bit of time in an overview today is the Executive Order 55 from 2018, which really introduces the concept of negative carbon emissions into the public dialogue. And this is something that we'll go over in a little more detail. It is interesting. It is a bit of a change in the paradigm on how we define our greenhouse gas emissions, really introducing the idea of net greenhouse gas emissions and the concept of carbon neutrality. So we'll talk about that in some more depth. And SB 100 is another relevant policy from 2018, which updates our renewable portfolio standard. That is the policy which drives the electric utilities to procure electricity from clean sources, and updating that to 60% renewable by 2030 is the current target set by SB 100 in 2018. I'll mention as well that the city has received a couple accolades for our previous climate action plan and implementation. Mayor Scharf recently received the Platinum Beacon Award. We have a great video up on the website of the reception from that ceremony. That's from the California League of Cities, and it's the highest level of recognition that a city can get for taking climate action plan. So we're all really proud of that.
We were the only city in the state to get it this year.
And there's only been 4 in the entire history of the Beacon program. So it's a really great recognition for all of us, and I think a testament to what we have done and what we can continue to do. Thank you, Mayor. There's no regulatory deadline to update our climate action plan. However, cities at the leading edge, we believe, are often at the benefit of a few different things. We have the benefit of discovering what the opportunities are for Cupertino as we travel along this path along with the rest of the state. We have an opportunity to demonstrate leadership in areas that we are uniquely excel at. And also, we tend to be more able to capture funding that's associated with greenhouse gas reductions targets from various granting agencies, nonprofits. Not to mention that these are not easy targets to discuss and reach. And so we're looking for the benefit of time and early planning horizon as we look into these long range targets. So a little bit on our trend to date and progress to date in emissions. So what we've observed in our latest greenhouse gas inventory, which is from 2018, is overall we've seen a 24% reduction since our baseline year of 2010. That does exceed the city's target that we set back in 2015, which was a 15% target versus the 2010 baseline. So as you can see, we have exceeded our 2020 goal, and that offers really one good reason to take another look at our goals and targets. You can see that the major source of reductions in the last few years is in the electricity sector, and that is all of the carbon emissions associated with the power plants that are providing us with electrons on the power grid. Pardon me. So the key thing there is really from 2010 to 2015, you can see a drop, and then the major drop occurs with our entry into the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Agency. So obviously a huge drop in electricity sector emissions, and one of the driving reasons behind looking at further electrifying the other uses in our city. There are natural gas and transportation are now representing a much larger share of our relative emissions every year. And so that'll continue to be a focus as we discuss various strategies. And in the staff report, we outlined some of the considerations of what we may see in the future when it comes to decarbonizing these end uses. So just briefly on why we're talking about targets at this stage in the process, and a little background on how the state gives us guidelines and best practices give us guidelines for target setting. And just to note on what role does the local government have in what is essentially a global issue. So the way we see it, the state really sets some of these economy-wide regulations. A couple of really recent examples is the recent executive orders from Governor Brown looking at rulemakings around making all new vehicle sales carbon-free, and also by conserving significant amounts of open space in the context of carbon sequestration. So those are two examples of regulatory proceedings that are going to support the statewide targets as we go into the future. Where regional governments come in, regional partnerships and joint powers authorities like Silicon Valley Clean Energy, they're really been valuable as implementation partners, generating grant funds, really supporting with best practices and procedures. And then the local government really has a very powerful part to play, actually, in shaping the built environment. That's really the key locus for making decisions about where we put houses, cars, open spaces, and those all have a major impact. That's the major lever that cities have when it comes to climate action. So I want to mention as well, like why are we talking about reduction targets at this early stage? We really want to get the council's feedback on a few things. So number one, we want to make a judgment about what's politically feasible. Targets really should be harmonious with the local leadership and in the best interests of the local public. They have to be financially feasible. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but climate measures and emissions targets really have to make sense in terms of financial constraints. It's just the reality of how programs get implemented. And also we want to have a very robust public engagement process in the next few months. And we'd like to go into that process with a clear direction from the City Council, particularly in answering the questions of how fast should we be going, how aggressive or should we be relative to the state goals, and also taking a look at some other cities. Oh, and I did want to mention as well, there's the California Air Resources Board has developed a scoping plan which provides a lot of information for our use in setting targets. Again, the city has a huge amount of leeway in what we can do with setting targets, and the Air Resources Board has put together a lot of excellent resources for us to consider. So here's what we're proposing as a starting place again for discussion. These are all going to be studied for feasibility and cost as we go through the process of technical study. What we want to discuss today is what you think about these target dates relative, again, to the state goals and the goals that other organizations have set in recent years, and introduce a couple new concepts. The first one is this carbon emissions target, carbon neutrality date, as well as a zero waste community date. Those would be new in our climate action plan. So the first one, I'll just say we had discussed this in the commission and looked at the date of 2045, which is what the state has set as an economy-wide carbon neutral target. And after some good discussion, we thought that setting a date earlier than required by the state would be prudent and sufficient, and offer a fair amount of good headway for us to reach that goal. Achieving negative net carbon emissions, we'll talk a little bit about what that means in a little bit. The goal number 3 was actually added by the commission, great suggestion by the commission, to set a date for city-owned facilities, a more aggressive target of the year 2030 to achieve carbon neutrality in city facilities in 10 years' time. Shifting our existing carbon emissions target from 2035 up by 5 years to 2030. And I'll show you what that looks like on a little visual here in the next slide. And then establishing a zero waste community target date of 2035. We'll come back to that. Here's just what that looks like in a visual. A couple things are a little different here compared to our previous climate action plan, as I mentioned. What we're looking at here is net greenhouse gas emissions. And this is where things get a little different, a little more interesting compared to our previous cap. We're not just considering reducing absolute emissions, although that has to maintain the primary focus. We're also introducing the concept of negative emissions. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but the key thing to remember here is a little bit hard to show on this chart, but you can imagine that these lines here are representative of both reducing our absolute emissions, for example, by becoming more efficient or reducing the number of miles traveled on our road, but also by developing sources of negative carbon emissions. And those are things like tree canopies, natural carbon sinks, et cetera. So this is just indicative, illustrative of what is proposed as a carbon neutral date for Cupertino and how that relates in the blue line to our existing target pathway. So what's carbon neutral mean? I spent a fair amount of time in the staff report describing this concept, but essentially it's the math that shows sources equal sinks. So what are carbon sources? Natural gas being combusted in our city. The electricity sector still has a small amount of carbon emissions. The off-road sector, the various sectors that you saw in that stacked bar chart earlier, those are all of our emissions. So we believe the primary focus should remain to reduce those emission sources. However, Executive Order 55 really introduces this idea to maximize carbon sequestration. And it makes a lot of sense if you think about it at a statewide level. There's a lot of land at the statewide level, agriculture, natural working lands. Those are all really the primary places where the state of California is looking to sequester carbon. So really it's just a change of mindset to think about our natural and working lands as a sink of carbon and managing them in an appropriate way to keep that carbon, get it out of the air and sequester it into the soil, or in other innovative ways such as biochar, protecting or expanding wetlands, et cetera. Direct air capture is a category of mechanical technologies, really at the early stages of development, but that is also what you could consider to be a carbon sequestration technology. What does that mean in a city? Scaling it down, it really means looking at what are our natural resources. And I give an example in the staff report about what the carbon impact would be in Cupertino of, for example, doubling our urban canopy. We can make a calculation of how much carbon that sequesters and manage that appropriately, include that in our reporting. There's many other ways to achieve carbon neutrality. I go into a little bit about This is how the city of Palo Alto has achieved their carbon neutrality goal for electricity sector and their gas provision by purchasing renewable energy credits. Is another way that's done commonly. What we'll be doing once we set these targets is really doing the analysis to say, is this feasible? What are the sources in Cupertino? What are the technologies that have not been invented yet? That's all part of the conversation as we go forward and setting these targets and the various strategies to support those targets. So I just wanted to spend a little time on that concept because it is new in this planning process. So just taking a quick look at some recent examples from neighboring cities. There haven't been a ton of cities adopting a carbon neutrality target yet, but there are several underway right now with considering such. So I just picked 2 cities that have set a carbon neutral date, and I picked a one here that is what I consider to be one of the most aggressive ones, which is Menlo Park. So Menlo Park's recently adopted climate action plan from June of this year sets a carbon neutral within a decade target. And the proposed pathway is a 90% reduction in emissions and a 10% negative emissions to be defined as, again, natural lands or direct carbon capture. So that's a very aggressive target. And some of the strategies that they propose to get there is an electrify on burnout ordinance, proposing and supporting all new cars on Menlo Park roads are electric by 2025, and a 25% reduction in reduced car mile travel, and then direct carbon removal for the remaining greenhouse gases. So this is a really exciting plan. It's really innovative. Unfortunately, one of the cautionary tales here is that the budget to get there was severely cut back in light of some of the budgetary constrictions from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I believe where the city is at now is they have a very attractive target. However, they have to come back at a later date to put resources behind that target. So I think there's a great conversation to be had there about setting a target date earlier. Another city that has adopted a carbon neutral date is the city of Oakland in August of this year. And city of Oakland set a carbon neutrality date by 2045. So that's consistent with the state guidelines. Some of the strategies that they put behind that target is a carbon investment program, which is essentially a greenhouse gas fee on new developments, expanding their tree canopy to provide some of that direct carbon capture benefit, electrify all buildings by 2045, which is a huge component of our existing strategy. It's something that we'll likely want to accelerate as we look towards carbon neutral. And also I highlighted the fact that Oakland included a very strong equity focus, acknowledging the fact that a lot of policies in the past have either not included a diverse set of voices in their decision making, or are distributing the benefits in a way that are unequal. And so essentially the Oakland cap, I think, makes a great move of providing an equity score for all of the various strategies that they were looking at, and basically stack ranking according to wide distribution of benefits, and also reducing risks, as we also talk about accelerating risks from hotter days, greater floods, et cetera. So I thought that was an innovative part of the Oakland Climate Action Plan. Now, on to the discussion about the vision statement. Again, this is something that, there's a lot of text, but I just wanted to highlight the key concepts and get your feedback. This is a vision of, we really want to set the stage again for public participation. We want to have a vision statement that is supported by the local leadership, that is really guiding the process. So this doesn't really represent, like you may have heard the concept of a post-carbon economy or framework. This is really just to guide the team as we go through the process. So I wanted to introduce some of these vision statements and get your feedback on these. The equity component is really a statement that we think is important. Again, we want to include a very diverse audience in the planning process. We want to avoid creating any disparity in plans that might create an unequal distribution of opportunities and benefits in the future with these investments that we're going to make. And that the diversity of Cupertino is really represented in the planning process. Are we reaching out to people with disabilities, to elders, to the youth, to people of color who live in our city, who work in our city? Are they included in the planning process? The statement of innovation is really meant to say that we want to be innovative in both the policies that we're considering, but also areas of technology and public-private partnerships, other strategies that we're considering to be leading edge. The concept of urgency here is really to say, again, looking at the process, we think that there's a case to be made to change the process of the climate action planning in a way that really highlights the flexibility that we'll need as we look at this long range process. We just don't know if there's some technology that's going to come along and we'll want to be ready to respond to that. So in this process of urgency and flexibility, what we're proposing is essentially developing 5-year cap updates, such as what we're going through today, but combine that with shorter term tactical plans. So the example of Mountain View, I think, is a good one. They have a process of every so often updating the cap framework, the larger framework, but then every 3 years they have this cadence of a tactical plan that's then executed on and budgeted for. So we think that's a required kind of way to become and maintain flexibility in our strategies. And then the vision of resilience and adaptation. We do plan to create a adaptation section to our climate action plan this year. And that is really meant to address a few things. We know that global temperatures are going to reach beyond 1 degree, probably 1.5 degrees Celsius between 2030 and 2050. This is going to cause increased risks for the city, namely increased smoke days, increased heat days. We want our climate action plan to address these future hazards and make some connections to apply the strategies that can protect the economic productivity, community livability, and the quality of life in Cupertino, looking forward to those hotter years. Again, the Commission really provided a lot of good feedback on these vision statements and the goals, and we received some good public comment. So this is really the result of that collaboration between staff and the public and the commissioners. So just looking at our proposed timeline, we have formed a subcommittee made up of 2 members of the Sustainability Commission. We're going to be working directly with that subcommittee in the planning of the public engagement process. So we'll be hosting a number of meetings with that subcommittee as we go forward in the process, and we'll really be looking to partner with that subcommittee as the key point of planning throughout the next year. We are underway with procuring a consultant to support the public engagement, someone who's been through this process with other cities before, and again, really look at a way to include the most diverse audience that we can, and also adapt to virtual public engagement, which is something that we're all learning, and I think getting pretty good at. But it probably won't be a typical kind of public planning process. It will be hybrid or virtual, most likely. The next steps here, looking out into the near future, is we're going to be updating our greenhouse gas forecast. Looking out into the future, one of the things we need to update is really quantify how all of these recent state policies impact that target path. So what we need to do is see if we did nothing, what's the business as usual case? We need to put that on paper and see where we stand. and that'll help us to quantify what amount of work Cupertino needs to do to reach carbon neutrality by a certain date. So that technical work will be underway in the coming months. And that's really going to help us to develop a comprehensive set of considerations as then we go back to the public and the council with various strategies and firm up these goals that we talk about today. We also hope to, by the time budget season comes around, have at least a few high impact measures that we can come up for budget consideration the very next fiscal year. And then we'll be finalizing the planning and creation of the document for public review by summer 2021. So that's the proposed timeline. So what are we again looking at today? Looking for your feedback on. We want to get your input and direction on these initial goals, and this will really help us to have a very robust public process as we get into the details. And that's the end of my presentation, Mayor.
Okay, great. Thank you. Before we bring it back to council, we will go to public comment. So if you're an attendee and you wish to speak, please raise your hand. You will have 3 minutes, and starting tonight, our video division has a timer that will count down the 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, the city clerk will cut you off. So pay attention to the timer and time your comments, because you won't be able to go beyond 3 minutes anymore. So I've got 6 hands raised so far. The first person is Pragya Nadaran, Natasha, I can't pronounce your name. Welcome, Pragya.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're unmuted. Go ahead. How do you pronounce your last name?
Nadarajan.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Pragya Nadarajan, a sophomore in Cupertino High School with Cupertino High School Environmental Club. We urge you to pass the amendments to the Cupertino Climate Action Plan in order to make sure that those of future generations who will inherit the city and world, including my generation, will be able to live in a clean environment. We would like the Climate Action Plan's deadline to be moved to 2030 overall and not just city-owned buildings. And we believe this can be done by heavily incentivizing electricity to help transitioning from fossil fuels completely. Also, one thing we could do to achieve this goal is also to implement a gas tax in the future, but not currently, as we need to focus on transitioning to electricity so fossil fuels aren't a problem. Thank you for listening to my public comment. I hope you can take this into consideration with the amendments to the Climate Action Plan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being brief. Next, we have Gwen Azar. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Good evening, council members and Mayor Scharf. My name is Gwen Azar. I'm a junior at Cupertino High School, and I'm a member of the Cupertino Youth Climate Action Team. We're very excited for the opportunities this updated Climate Action Plan presents, and we hope that our city will take the initiative to become leaders in aggressive climate policy. I think that we should join cities like Palo Alto and Menlo Park in setting ambitious goals, such as Menlo Park's goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. I believe that our leadership on this issue will inspire other cities across the county, state, and country. And as the council said in 2018 with the climate emergency resolution, the climate crisis needs to be treated as an emergency. We obviously don't have much time to combat this issue. In the next few decades, cities, states, and countries around the world are going to have to make drastic changes to their approach if we want to avoid the gravest consequences of climate change. This is the reality that we face, and I think that we're in the position in Cupertino to be ahead of the curve and start implementing these goals and policies now. We've already set aggressive reach codes, and this climate action plan presents the perfect chance to continue on that path of climate leadership. I think we should set the most aggressive reduction goals as possible, like carbon neutrality by 2030. Again, I think that we are positioned to be leaders on this issue and lead the state and really the whole country forward into a greener and more sustainable and livable future. I'm very grateful for all the work and thought that's being put into this process, especially with public engagement. And I'm excited about where this climate action plan update will take our city. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Galaxy Tab A Annie. Welcome, Galaxy Tab A Annie. I'm thinking this is
hi.
Jennifer Griffin. Okay.
Yes,
Welcome.
I have a new nickname, Annie. Hi, can you all hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Mayor Steve. Hi, this is Jennifer Griffin, and thank you for the very detailed discussion about this, I can't even say it, sustainability goals. And thank you for explaining what these are, because there are a lot of concepts there and things are dynamic and moving. I will say, because of COVID, a lot of things have changed. I have been following these meetings with the sustainability push for the last year. I'm still not convinced of getting rid of gas. We have a lot of issues involved with that because of the fires, particularly in Santa Cruz. I don't want PG&E taken over by the state. That's a no. That's like, let's don't go there. That's not a very good plan. They just want the land. The other thing is, we need to have a discussion about how do we build in the future? Because of COVID, we're going to have changes in HVAC systems. We're going to have situations where even in modern homes, we're going to have updates because of COVID and the potential that we may have something like this again. How do we build this? Where are we with this with sustainability? HVAC systems for homes are major components. We need to take a look at this. I will say again, things are different than they were the last time we met about sustainability. We need to look at this. It's not a simple concept, and for a lot of homeowners, HVAC systems can run up to $25,000, heating and cooling. Also, the high density housing bills, now that I know where their money is coming from, they are a no-go. I have zero confidence in any of these people that are pushing these housing bills. All they want is money and power. They don't care about homelessness, home affordability, or environmental concerns. It is strictly money. And so if somebody's pushing these housing bills, particularly Senator Wiener's, it's a no-go. It's a farce. It's a lie. And we need to, if people are talking about sustainability and talking about these housing bills, they're not part of the equation. They are based on lies. So we have to reevaluate where we're going with this. COVID has thrown us into about the density issues with building. We have to respect COVID and see what it's telling us about future building.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Next, we are on to Sophia Wang. Welcome, Sophia.
Hi, my name is Sophia, and I am a member of the Cupertino Youth Climate Action Team. So, as we all know, climate change will have devastating impacts on ecosystems and will likely kill or threaten hundreds of thousands of people globally. We need to massively reduce emissions in order to mitigate these effects. And right now, we're in a great position to take huge strides forward as a city. The Cupertino Climate Action Plan is already doing a lot, but it could reach much further in terms of slashing emissions. One way to do this is to adopt a replace on burnout ordinance, which would require old gas appliances to be replaced with electric appliances when they burn out. This would further be paired with rebates to make the process more equitable for every single person. I think, as this has already been mentioned in the PowerPoint, Menlo Park is currently exploring said ordinance, and we think it would be very beneficial and feasible for Cupertino to do the same. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Daschle Williams. Welcome.
Hello, my name is
Hi.
Daschle Williams, and I'm the Conservation Assistant for the Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter. I'd like to thank Andre for a great presentation, and I have a lot of confidence in staff to execute the CAP planning process as outlined in the vision statement and to ultimately deliver an excellent and aggressive climate action plan. Particularly in the process vision statement, I really like the inclusion of equity and protecting biodiversity. Maybe like a slight suggestion for a weird word, we could say protecting and expanding biodiversity, because we do ultimately want to end up with a net benefit to nature beyond what we had before. With regards to the targets, I think there's room to go more aggressive. I would really like to see Cupertino adopt something along the lines of Menlo Park or Palo Alto. I think setting a goal of carbon neutrality by 2030 is ambitious, but I think ultimately it is achievable. And we're seeing a legislative ecosystem of different cities and major stakeholders moving towards full electrification on a rapid time frame. Just tonight, San Jose City Council is voting on their updated natural gas prohibition ordinance, which would be a major catalyst for future laws like that throughout the nation, I hope. So I think that if we set strong targets now, then we'll be well positioned to adapt to changing technologies and to be one of the leaders as our whole region moves forward to reducing emissions. So thank you so much. I really look forward to engaging further in this climate action plan process, and I think we can develop a really strong climate action plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Connie Cunningham. Welcome, Connie.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Connie Cunningham. I've lived in Cupertino for 33 years, and I'm a member of the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. On October 15th, I joined my voice with that of Dr. Shawnee Kleinhouse, who is the environmental advocate for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, to speak at the Sustainability Commission meeting on this topic, which is the initial draft goals and vision statement, including environmental justice. I was particularly interested in California Executive Order B55, which added the goal of carbon neutral economy-wide. Andrew DeVort's staff report that night was excellent. It was excellent again tonight. That night, his report advised that they plan to use a social justice and equity lens to create the draft plan. And it was good to hear that the CAP 2.0 would be discussed with residents over the next year, beginning with this study session tonight. And I was very pleased to see that the staff report tonight includes subparagraph D on resilience and adaptation to establish a climate adaptation measures such as green infrastructure and protecting biodiversity that keeps Cupertino residents and businesses safe, productive, and happy while climate risks accelerate. It also gives an illustrative example, which talks about the Cupertino urban tree canopy study, which identifies almost 2,000 acres of additional plantable space, and that will double the urban tree canopy, which would remove approximately 6,300 tons of carbon dioxide emissions per year from the air. I am also speaking on behalf of those who cannot speak, who are the birds. They live within the boundaries of our city also and provide us with joy and a window into nature. We who live in the city can speak. As evidence for our interest in wildlife in our city, the FY 2019-20 City Work Plan project entitled The Dark Sky Lights Out Policy and Bird Safe Design Guidelines will be heard later this evening under agenda item 11. I agree with this climate action plan and that it should have aggressive targets. I agree with the previous speaker who was talking about making sure that we are fast, aggressive, and that we will be able to reach these emissions. Again, I'm targeted on the carbon neutrality, but I like all of the plan. So thank you so much. Your support is critical. I urge the council to provide input and direction that supports this plan and supports these aggressive deadlines. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Connie. And last we have Shawnee Kleinhouse. Welcome, Shawnee.
Thank you, Mayor Sharf and council members, and thank you, Connie, for speaking so well on taking a lot of the comments that I wanted to say, so I will say this. Thank you for working on a robust climate action plan. Thank you for including biodiversity in the vision for this plan. Including biodiversity will allow you to include nature and the non-human residents of Cupertino in the goals of the SCAP and take actions that synergistically support climate action and provide ecosystem services and sustain our local species. The link to the later items of bird safe design and dark sky can also come here as something that you can do, because waste of energy on unnecessary lighting has shown to cost billions of dollars in the United States. And bird safe design helps reduce the emission, the heat loss from glass, if you do it right, by having less glass or by retrofitting the glass. So there is synergistic impact to those actions that you'll be looking at later tonight and the ones you're looking at now. I hope that you can also include in the goals and in the measurements something that has to do with biodiversity. And I can look and work with you on that. Palo Alto and Mountain View are doing some of that. So hopefully there is places to look at which are already taking some action in that respect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have one more hand raised. Kitty Moore, welcome, Kitty Moore.
Good evening, Mayor Scharf. Kitty Moore, representing myself only. I do commend the 2030 carbon neutral target, and I agree with Shawnee. We need to work on biodiversity, and I hope that we look at some policies in the future in our municipal code and for development. I do want to bring up the point that we still have residents who are heating with wood, and we need to support a transition from that. Regards to the comment on the HVAC systems and COVID, the buildings need to be upgraded to have their HVAC systems be able to handle HEPA filtration, if that's going to be considered. It's my understanding that you can replace the filters with MERV 13 filters, which will filter out about 80% of COVID particles. And an HVAC system with HEPA filters, you're at 99.9%. And lastly, I'm concerned about the diversion rates of recyclables. And I would like to know what is actually happening with our plastics, which have the numbers 3 through 7 on them. It's my understanding that those are ending up in a landfill, possibly in another country. So I'd like to have some real information about those diversion rates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kitty. I don't see any more hands raised from the public, so we will go back to the City Council for council comments. Rod, you're the senior member. Would you like to go first?
I'd be happy to do that. Thank you, Stephen. So I wanted to go back to the GHG emissions. This is like page, 5 on the staff report. It has the numerical values as well as the bar graph. I wonder, do you have the ability to put that up along with the numbers, or just that can you just do the chart? I can talk to it if so.
Unfortunately, I don't have the full chart in my presentation here.
Okay.
Will this be sufficient?
Then maybe you just put up the slide that has the stack bars. So I want to talk about that for a bit.
All right.
No, thank you. So the natural gas emissions here from 2015 to 2018 have gone up by 33.7%, so by a third. Can you tell us what's going on here? I mean, clearly from 2010 to 2015, we had a reduction, but it seems like we've had a big reversal. And natural gas is now the leading, unlike the rest of the Bay Area, the leading GHG emissions source in our city.
Yeah, this is an interesting phenomenon, and since we conducted our inventory in 2018, we've done a little more digging into that question, and it'll be a subject once we get our technical consultant on board to confirm some of our back of the napkin math that staff has done in the last year. Keeping in mind that the 2018 numbers were put together in 2019 after we received all the all the information. There are a number of assets in the community that utilize natural gas and fuel cells. Notably, a large one at Apple Park, which we believe, just using the sustainability report data that's publicly available, we believe that's a large component of that increase between 2015 and 2018. Those are sizable systems. One thing to note, though, is that the gas that's utilized in those fuel cells, in particular Apple, are considered Green E certified gas. It is pulled from a landfill. However, the way that those systems operate, they still do release emissions in the city boundaries. And so this is an interesting one that we'll be digging into a lot more. The key thing about fuel cells is that they probably will have a place in the energy transition. We need to have that discussion collectively to really know what that place is. And so that's just my initial take, is that the fuel cell assets are probably the largest driver in that increase, as well as additional construction activity in the commercial sector. But it really is in the commercial sector that we see that rise in natural gas consumption.
It's really interesting, because in the rest of the Bay Area, buildings and so forth are perhaps 20%, and transportation is 45% and growing. In our case, natural gas is actually bigger. I know that, businesses that want continuity, governments that want continuity, homeowners that want continuity, are tempted to look at solutions that augment the grid. We at City Hall, we have a diesel generator, right? A really old one that's in bad shape and doesn't power the whole building anymore. But at first blush, you might think, if you're looking for a resiliency solution, diesel's a bad deal, because it puts out particulate matter emissions. It doesn't combust fully, right? Like a natural gas does. The problem is that when a business or a government chooses fuel cells that operate on natural gas, those things are so expensive as capital investments that it makes sense to run them 24/7, 365 days a year. And so in discussions about this at the Air District and at Silicon Valley Clean Energy, I think we've quite convinced ourselves that they're not really the answer to sustainability. And we're seeing that in this effect from 2015 to 2018. It turns out that many of them can actually run on hydrogen. So if we could produce hydrogen economically, perhaps they could be, part of a resiliency solution for the grid. The folks at the National Fuel Cell Resource Center in Irvine believe that it could be the case if we could figure out how to do hydrogen. And maybe that could also be a storage means for us if solar power became inexpensive enough. So I would like us to consider in looking at this, how we really attack the natural gas part of this. Ultimately, we need some storage means, whether it's hydrogen or a battery or something, combined with a renewable fuel source that would work to reduce these emissions if we want to get the GHG number down pretty clearly. A substantial amount of this electricity reduction that we've had through SVCE is now turned into natural gas. So it feels like we're treading water a bit. And if you aggregate and say you acknowledge we're going to need natural gas for the next 10, 15 years, at least if we do it on the grid, we can pare that down over time. Once a company buys fuel cells, the temptation will be to run them for 20 or 30 years until they need to be replaced. And I think we ought to be looking at policies. I know policies that discourage the use of these things, at least as regards consumption of natural gas. The city of Santa Clara banned them, and I believe a court decided that wasn't legal, but we ought to be looking at a variety of ways to move this thing in the right direction. You know, it seems to me that we ought to be looking at, we did this wonderful stuff on reach codes for new development, and I think we need to be looking at reach codes for replacement of systems that fail in existing buildings, and why. We've talked about it, and we know it happened this year, and we can expect more of the same, right? If we're looking at adaptation, we can count on a hot future, and we can count on a smoky future. Wildfires are going to be part of California's milieu for the next, for the foreseeable future. And they're also hot. So in my house, when I moved in here nearly, I guess, more than 25 years ago, we found, it's a 2-story home, and we found a whole house fan feasible for cooling. We'd simply open the windows and suck in the cool air after the sun had gone down. But as we all know, for a couple of months this year, in the middle of a pandemic, no less, you open your window and all you're doing is bringing in smoke with an AQI of, 200 or something. That doesn't work. Meanwhile, the house is sitting at 90, 95 degrees. It's a health risk. So what do? You go outside. And now you may have a mask that partly filters, but if you're in a fortunate situation, you have a cooling system. So I think it's going to be more and more common as systems fail for those that want to survive the situation to install cooling systems, even if they don't have them today. And it turns out that whole systems that do that with heat pumps are actually quite cost effective. If you want a heating and an HVAC system for your home that runs on electricity, it can be purchased and operated quite competitively to the existing gas systems. So I think we need to finish up. Yes, we need to be looking at that to see how we could replace existing systems. And let's see. Finally, on the overall plan, I think we need to look at not only re-examining how we're doing, but we ought to have some waypoints. More than 2030, we need at least one interim point. I know San Jose has this plan to do 6% a year down. I'm interested in, and I'm wondering if that's just incurring a lot of overhead and bureaucracy to do the calculation every year. But it seems to me like 1 or 2 waypoints as actual goals on the path to 2030 and then 2045 could make some real sense. So by that means, right, we hold ourselves accountable. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Could the video division, sorry, I forgot to do this for the first speaker, but I think we have a 5-minute timer as well, don't we? Kirsten, or video division. So since we only have 15 minutes left, please limit your comments to 5 minutes. Go ahead, Liang Chow. Liang,
So I have 5 questions, but looks like there won't be time for the staff to provide me answers, so I'll just go through my questions. First, is the subcommittee from Sustainability Commission that's open to public? I assume it is. Second question, and you mentioned that we need to double urban canopy. I think that's great. I really think Cupertino doesn't have enough trees, especially not enough trees with wider canopy. And does that mean we should consider zoning that would require more canopy coverage on our sidewalks and our new constructions, then would that be included in this climate action plan? And third question, why do we need a consultant to do public engagement? It seems we do this for every project, and that seems to be an expertise I suppose we have developed in our staff. And you also mentioned a technical consultant. That might make more sense. So please clarify whether we are hiring consultants just for public engagement or for their technical specialties. And the fourth question, I'd like to know for Menlo Park and Palo Alto, they have set these aggressive goals, and you have mentioned also that Menlo Park had some significant financial investment, and then they had to pull back because of COVID. So how much is it? What kind of investment? And as I understand, Palo Alto also purchased the credits. I suppose that's also financial investment. So I'd like to know how much they have decided to invest to achieve these aggressive goals. The fifth question, I have the same question Rod had with the stack, the diagram that was shown earlier. It seems from the trend, there is not much reduction except in electricity. But then the goal that's set, according to the staff report, is we need to achieve 50% of below our 2010 level. That means by 2030, it just for GHG emission. According to the trend we have now, I don't see how that can be achieved, because the only category that has significant reduction is electricity. The others have minor, and natural gas even increased. So how can we even achieve that by 2030? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I will go next.
Should
So
we
the two
get answers, or so how should we do this?
Well, sure, if the staff can answer all those questions quickly.
Sure, Mayor, I can take a quick attempt here. So starting with the last question around the investment required to meet the goals. In most cases, cities set up a budget and planning process looking at the host of strategies in the CAP, and then going through a process every year to include some of those strategies in each budget cycle. So what we're looking to do is adopt a process like that on a more regular basis. That's a formal look at all the strategies that were proposed in the CAP, as well as anything new that's come up in the last few years, and get those into the formal budget planning process, which is one of the key considerations, I think, when we set the targets, that we are reasonably confident that we can provide resources to achieve those targets.
What I mean is I'd like some real dollar amount. The others have done.
I don't have those off the top of my head, but those are publicly available plans, the two that I mentioned, as well as the Appendix A in the staff report lists those cities that have set carbon neutral targets. And each of those caps probably do have a budget component publicly available. Your first question about the subcommittee, that will not be a Brown acted public body. We had set up that in order to generate some ideas, which will then go to the regular Sustainability Commission for recommendations as the advisory body that's been set up. So it'll be more of a planning committee.
Please consult with the city attorney. The subject matter is not something that has limited scope. So this is supposed to be a Brown Act committee, because the spirit is that any deliberation should be done in public.
Hi.
So.
Yes, correct. This has been run through the city attorney's office. Regarding
I don't know.
Yeah, we can talk about it, and I'll look at the scope. Thanks.
Okay,
I think that's all I have time for.
Okay, thank you. So I just had questions. Replace on burnout. Is Menlo Park subsidizing this in any way? It's not actually the cost of an electric appliance versus a gas appliance. A lot of houses don't have the electrical capacity to install electric water heaters, electric furnaces, electric clothes dryers. So I'm just wondering, is this cost totally borne by the homeowner, or is the city helping to fund that replace on burnout in some way?
It's a great question, Mayor. The current cities that have passed such ordinances, I believe, or are considering it, are going to do some form of cost effectiveness test in order to see what the impact on the homeowner would be. Currently, there's no requirement in the city of Cupertino. However, we're currently addressing that through some of the regional incentive programs, which try to incentivize electric replace on burnout for a gas appliance. And I imagine that will be need to be considered to offset, especially, again, going back to the equity issue. I think we would want to both require something as well as support the market in some way.
And so it sounds like, from what you said, the reason we fell backwards on natural gas is not individual residents so much as it is one big user, Apple, and their fuel cells. Is that the case?
From what we can tell, the data, the increase in natural gas is concentrated in the commercial sector.
Okay, but not just Apple, or mainly Apple's new campus with their fuel cells?
Again, I just did some back of the napkin math from what was publicly available from our largest customers, and it appears that's the most significant increase. Yes.
All right. Okay, that's all I had. So two more people to go. We have 8 minutes. Go ahead. Darcy, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I have too many comments. It'll probably take a solid 10 minutes, possibly 15. So what I can do is I can submit my written comments for this meeting. But encapsulating them, they have to do with recycling, the plastic wastes. I think we can do a deeper dive into how a lot of these purportedly recyclable wastes are treated. There are multiple things that are happening in the industry right now with regard to how we increase that efficacy rate, so that a lot of these plastics don't end up in random fields, not just domestically, but around the world. I'm sending out resources with regard to kind of detailing that problem. Frontline had a really good documentary in March, so I'll send a link to that, along with a few other articles. The other area I wanted to talk about was equity. I think equity is a very interesting and useful way of looking at this problem. I mean, typically what you see when you see environmental topics being discussed in the context of equity is that in a lot of socioeconomically more disadvantaged areas, you tend to have the major polluters. But the fact of the matter is we have a very diverse demographic, but we don't have as much of what people would consider economic disadvantage. However, we do have a major source or two of pollution within our sphere of influence or our borders. So, I thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about equity, because it's not something that is our communities want to really, talk about as a discussion point. We don't put that on our sleeve, but at the same time, I think it really does affect us, not just in this manner, but in other ways as well. You think about, are we being unfairly vilified in the public on what issue, on this issue or that? Or, when we look at per pupil student funding, does that have anything to do with equity and, the demographic makeup? I don't know, but the fact is, in this draft vision statement, you have, specific language talking about the quote, multiracial character of Cupertino, end quote. And so, it sounds all friendly and, it's nice to smile and look at it. But I think if we're really trying to have an efficacious conversation about it for future purposes, look at the realities of this, do it, non-defensively and do it in a manner that I think is open and honest. And I think that, when you identify those various ways of, treating, certain demographic groups and thinking about how in reality the effects work. I think you lay groundwork for doing some very effective things, not just in terms of being treated fairly, but also making sure that our community effectively engages with the broader world. So those were the upshots of my comments. My follow-up question was about the zero waste community target date of 2035. I was curious about what Public Works in particular, but staff in general, think about the carbon neutrality in our city facilities by the year 2030. I would be interested, and you don't have to answer that right now. I have it all written down, and if staff's willing to follow up in a written medium as well, I'm more than happy to cede the rest of my time to John to make his comments. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay, I'm real glad we had this study session. I think this issue is something that we're all going to have to be focused on. And so my takeaway, good presentation from Andre, my takeaway is really about the things that I think we could do amongst ourselves to start working on this reduction. I did have one quick question, and that is, temp increase by 1.5 degrees by 2050. Do you know what the temp increase that has already elapsed or increased today?
We're currently at about one degree Celsius above pre-industrial times.
Yeah, and so then only 1.5 by 2050. To me, I think it's going to go up more than that, but I think we should all be aware of the significance there. Okay, so then I agree with or I focus on that chart, the bar chart for which Councilman Sinks talked about, and the heavy increase in the natural gas, or the other one is the auto, and still being so high. And so with that, and also the electrify on burnout, things that we could do if we were able to get more car chargers, e-chargers around the community. So many of our transportation trips are just local. And if we really did have more places to plug in, I think there would be more of a reason for the community to be looking at the electric cars as opposed to the gas cars. So I would really be suggesting that be kind of high on the priority list, getting more e-chargers around the community to help address that big chunk of ours. I'll do a quick one on the resident engagement. Absolutely. I mean, unless we get the word out, unless we get the community involved, there's only a limit on how much reduction we're going to see. And so I would make the comment that I think to really get the community involved, the engagement needs to be on a small group focus as opposed to a large group. Small group where we can actually talk to them individually, talk to them about when that water heater needs to be replaced, what are the ways they could, get it electrified, the things of that nature. And then the last one, which I kind of think is the most important to me, and that is, sounds great that we're going to have this subcommittee. I would like to suggest that one of the high school students that's on the climate action group be included on that subcommittee. They have so much enthusiasm. They have so many ideas about a demographic that otherwise maybe isn't really being our primary focus. So I would say by bringing one of those into the subcommittee, at least one of the students, and let them work with us to improve our community for reducing. And so those would be my comments. Thank you for having this tonight. Yep.
Thank you, Councilmember. And Mayor, before we end, if we could just take a quick temperature check, this will be really useful for us going forward on the target date of 2040. Understanding there's a whole ton of information to consider, but just to get your initial take from the council on that date, that'll really help drive the process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I have enough information now. I mean, it's always sounds good to choose an earlier date. I don't know if I have enough information to know if it's practical or if we're, setting something where we're setting ourselves up for failure. And so I would leave that to, the committee and the next council to decide if those goals are realistic. I know we've done really well so far, and I don't have any reason to expect that we could not continue our leadership in the state in this matter. But then when I see what happened with natural gas, and it's kind of almost beyond our control, that one large user that put in fuel cells that Rod said will go for many, many decades. I mean, that kind of scares me a little, that we don't have control over that. So it's a non-answer, but I don't feel qualified to give an answer right now.
Any other thoughts for the
I
council
think we ought
members
to
in a
be
directional way?
ahead of the state substantially more than 5 years myself. I think that, 2040 is fine, but I would like to see it even earlier if we can figure out how to make that feasible. And I would like some, as I said, intermediate goals until we get there.
Okay.
I'm happy to weigh in.
I'd like to see some dollar amount because it's right now still pretty vague. So when we don't have numbers, we don't have dollars, and we say we want aggressive goals, I don't see how I can judge that. And then also for the subcommittee, I really think it should be a Brown Act open committee, especially public engagement is an important piece in this process. And I would like to see this to be a subcommittee of 2 members from Sustainability Commission and 2 members from the Planning Commission, because some of these really have to do with planning. If we want to, some of these will become city policies. Thank you.
And good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I just wanted to clarify that at this stage, there is no commitment and vote for particular goals. What we're seeking at this time is to determine what direction are we going in, so we know what to study and what cost benefit to come back with, and what to determine whether it is feasible or not.
I agree with Rod. If it's feasible, I think we should have aggressive goals. If we're setting ourselves up for failure because we don't even have control over the biggest carbon emitters, then that's concerning.
But I think it's fair to have some aspiration and then see what can be done, right? There's carrots and sticks. In other words, there are programs and there are regulations, and I think we need a combination of both. And we ought to be aggressive, and we ought to be comparing ourselves to the cities that are taking aggressive action. And if we, sometimes don't meet every goal, I think that's okay too. I think we'll be in better shape if we
so would
make
there
the
be
goals
interest
really
in
aspirational.
researching both a 2040 and a 2030 goal, is what I'm hearing, just to see a feasibility?
Yeah, or, split it and see if you can get to 2035.
Thank you.
I would also say I think we should leverage what goes behind those goals. If Menlo Park, they've all done the same type of analysis. They all have the same type of communities. And so by all means, go double check how Menlo Park came up with their aggressive goals. And is there anything flawed in that? And if not, Does it in fact carry over for our community? And then, let us know what is achievable without having to do all the work yourself. Mm-hmm. And the more aggressive, the better. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. No one else has anything. It's 6:50 now, and we are a little bit behind schedule. Does anyone need a break before we go into our regular meeting? Seeing nobody, we will go into our regular meeting. Madam City Clerk, can you do the roll call, please?
Councilmember Chow,
Here.
Councilmember Sinks,
Yes?
Councilmember Willie,
Here.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Here.
Mayor Sharp.
Here. Okay, so postponements, I see we have 2 postponements. The
Yes.
municipal code amendments to update the mobile vending regulations and the City of Cupertino 2020 Transportation Impact Fee Nexus Study.
Mr. Mayor, just a note about the transportation impact fee. It's actually being considered, continued to January 19th instead of December 15, which is noted on tonight's agenda.
Okay, oh, yeah, I see that, okay. But the mobile vending is December 15th, right?
Correct.
Okay, great. So now we are on to oral communications. This is for items not on the agenda. Each person can address the council for up to 3 minutes. We will have a timer running, and at 3 minutes, the speaker will be cut off. So pay attention to the timer and plan your comments. We can't discuss or make decisions on anything brought up during oral communications because it is not agendized. So I see 4 hands raised so far. First, we have Jennifer Griffin. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, Mayor Steve. I'm assuming you all can hear me.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin, and as we go into the future, now the vaccines, I guess we're going to have more available. I heard Moderna was going to have vaccines available, as well as Pfizer, which is wonderful, absolutely wonderful. We need to keep in mind that there were a number of things that were playing out in the last 2 to 3 years at the Sacramento level, at the legislative level, that a lot of people didn't understand what was going on. And I'm going to go back again to Senator Wiener and his housing bills. I felt during that entire time that I was being taken advantage of as a citizen of California because the wool was being pulled over our eyes. There was something weird going on at the Sacramento level, that there were legislators that were playing games and were out of touch with the citizens. It's like, oh, we'll laugh at the citizens because we're participating in some sort of a strange game and they're the patsy in the whole thing. Well, I'm sorry. We need to be very, very concerned and careful about as we go forward with the people who are funding these big housing bills. These are groups that are centered in the Bay Area. The more I've been reading about them, I'm beginning to wonder what their motivation is. Why do they think that they get to determine the future of California and take advantage of local control in the cities? Who do these people think they are? They're not elected. They're people with great amounts of money, and they think that they can dictate the future of the schools, the future of what is built on single family lots, the future of control at the city level. Who do these people think they are? It is time for pushback. When Senator Wiener introduces his new housing bills in December, keep an eye on who is funding these housing bills. Where is the money coming from? I'm not going to malign Senator Wiener. He's an elected official, but we have to be cognizant of the money factor. The money is being bled into Oregon and corrupting their politics. It is corrupting California politics. And we need to have a discussion in the open about who these people are and why they think that they know better about what a typical Californian knows or needs. I'm sorry. It's time for open discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Next is Michael Haas. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm just talking on behalf of my friend and employer, Charlene Lee. She apparently wasn't able to post her biography while she was running for city council. And she is a resident of Cupertino. She's deeply involved in the community. She's very concerned about it. And she grew up on a block right around the corner from my house. I lived there for 20 years, and it was a nice, quiet, small town, Cupertino, and it's become blown up with big money and big corporations on Sand Hill Boulevard. The Valco project is taking away the last part of quiet Cupertino that's left. And Charlene Lee seems to feel that the council election was mishandled, and that she thinks that there should be a recount of the election. I was talking about the big corporations on the last guest speaker. That definitely seems to be what's going on in Cupertino. It was a small farm town, and it's just getting busier and busier. It's starting to look like downtown San Mateo or downtown Palo Alto. And the green, all the talk about the environment is great, but the people of Cupertino, it's a nice, quiet, small town, and it should stay that way. And I don't understand why Charlene Lee didn't get the poster biography, even if it was, had some controversy in there. It still should have been legally allowed for her, since she was a registered candidate. So, my final words is that, Cupertino is a nice, quiet town, and what's happening on Wolf Boulevard with the Valco project just doesn't seem right. And I don't know how the city council approved this. She seems to think that they've been paid off, and it looks like, that's the case, that there's a lot of side incomes or something like that going on, because the people of Cupertino have just are going to bear the burden of these big companies and big money investment at the Valco project. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madam City Clerk, before we go to the next speaker, please explain about the biographies and how they were posted, because there seems to be some misunderstanding about this.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So all city council candidates were provided with the same opportunity to share a personal biography, which would be limited to 300 words on the city's elections webpage. And all candidates posted their bios by following the same required formatting guidelines, including Ms. Lee.
Okay, thank you. Next person is Rhoda Fry. Welcome, Rhoda.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to talk about the honorary plaques on city buildings and projects. With the library expansion project on the horizon, this reminded me about naming buildings and plaques. First, recall there had been a discussion about naming the library in the past. And after much consternation, the decision was no. We do need to remember that when we go to do the renovation expansion project. Also, in the past, Cupertino projects have been adorned by plaques with council member names who were in office at the time of the project completion. For example, when the library is complete, neither Mayor Scharf nor Councilmember Sinks will be recognized for their contribution to this project. However, I am in general against these signs altogether. This issue came to my attention many years ago when former council member Santoro, during a Cupertino candidate forum, suggested abolishing these signs altogether. One of his reasons was that it took away from the day-to-day work that we need to do in maintaining existing projects, and that vanity projects, I'm not sure whether he used those words, but those are not the things that we should necessarily be focusing on. So for those two reasons, that the right people wouldn't be recognized, but also we also need to recognize our daily work. I don't think that, and I guess I'm going to add a third reason, the cost of these signs too. We should put the money that we have into our projects, not into signage. So two things overall. We shouldn't be naming buildings after individuals in the community, and I don't think we should have plaques that have council member names on them for city projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda. Next is Vigi34. Welcome.
Hello?
We hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was at the Valco, and we were doing some speculating of the homeless shelters with Charlene Lee. We traveled there, and we took photos of the homeless shelter, and it turns out that the cops came and they talked with the guys that were living at the homeless shelter, and we interacted with them for a few minutes. But our plan is to go to to file a lawsuit and possibly try to win some compensation.
Okay.
Is that right?
I don't know what. Are you saying you're filing a lawsuit?
We were going to make plans to go to court concerning the homeless shelter people that were there, and the interaction that we had with them after we met with them, and we talked, and we argued for a little bit, and then we decided that we would try to win something.
I see. Okay. Are you done? Okay. I guess no more for next. Charlene Lee, welcome.
Hi, cursing squall shall just lie because I cannot post my 300 word. So this on Thursday you cannot have hallway swear in inauguration. Also the elegant hair salon boss Susan Zhujian Chong, she is not registered voter, but she received bail. So this has an election. She received ballot. So this is election fraud. Also, Hallway daughter suicide at a New York University and died. And now she knows these young kids are very vulnerable, but she abused 3 students from 15-year-old to 17-year-old of Mountain West High, and abused them to ask 3 students to help her to win the election. Also, my 1100 alongside be stolen, and Captain Richard reject to do something, reject to catch the criminal. There are so many fraud. Also, I saw many Chinese American wear a very big flag to supporting Mayor Steve Shaw and Kitty Moore. And Hopewell also received a bribe from Stand Here developer in Main Street because they only put the north side of Homeway. So this in on Thursday, city manager Deborah Fang and city attorney need to say why Asian woman cannot post a 300-word biography, but Mayor Steve Shaw can post his 300-word. And why Kirsten Squasher want to lie? She let everyone can post a 300-word biography. Kirsten Squasher, can you say why you lie? Because you and Deborah Fang say I cannot post my 300-word biography because I am woman, Asian woman, so I should be discriminated. And why Elegance Hair Salon in Dieza and McLaren received ballot. She is not a registered voter, but received ballot and she voted. So there's a lot of fraud, and so Hongwei cannot swear in answer.
Okay, thank you. Once again, Kirsten, could you please explain what was required to post a biography and that everyone was able to do it?
Sure. So all candidates were required to adhere to a specific format, and everyone that chose to adhere to that format were allowed to post on the city's website election page. And Ms. Lee did elect to post her bio within that format on the city's webpage, along with all of the other candidates.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so that is it for oral communications. We are on to reports by council and staff. First, we have the city manager update on emergency response efforts. Welcome, Deb.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, a COVID specific report. There's been a lot of changes since the weekend. So we are in the state's purple tier, but so are 42 other counties in the state, which constitutes about 94% of the state's population. So the majority of the state's in purple because of the surge that we're currently experiencing in COVID cases. In Santa Clara County, there are additional restrictions due to the highest daily case count since the start of the pandemic, which we experienced as a county over the weekend, and it peaked over 700 cases in one day. The worry is also the shortage of hospital beds and personnel. Beds were at 3.6% COVID occupied on November 1st, and as of Monday, they are now at 10.6%. So the increase in our hospitals is also being felt. Stores and other facilities open to the public will be limited to 10% capacity indoors. Grocery stores, drugstores, and pharmacies will be allowed to operate at 25%. All facilities open to the public must establish a metering system to ensure that the applicable capacity limits are not exceeded. So much like you saw a lot of our retail outlets operating at the beginning of the pandemic during the full shelter in place. Outdoor gatherings up to a maximum of 100 people are allowed. The state limits such gatherings to First Amendment protected activities such as religious services or protests. Professional, collegiate, and youth sports will be temporarily prohibited. People can continue to engage in outdoor athletics and recreation where social distancing can be maintained at all times. A mask or face covering should be carried at all times. Hotels, other lodging is open for essential travel only and for use to facilitate isolation or quarantine. Leisure and non-essential travel are strongly discouraged. A mandatory 14-day quarantine for people who have traveled 150 miles outside the county is being deployed. Healthcare workers are exempted from this requirement. So a little bit of school guidance as well. Schools that are open or have been open can remain open. There is also a waiver process in place. If the school is using a phased approach to opening, they can continue to phase in. Those that are still closed must remain closed. Specific to, I got a little update from CUSD. Their status is they are going to continue in distance learning and offering in-person learning hubs for small cohorts of students at designated school sites through January of 2021. So that's their current posture. They will reassess for possible expansion of additional small groups and or moving into their phase 3 beginning in February of 2021. Phase 3 would allow a hybrid model of in-person and distance learning. An updated plan is going to the CUSD board on December 10th for any interested parents or members of the public who are particularly interested in the plan going forward for CUSD. The library is going back to curbside service to patrons of the library. This was after they had a short period of time being open to services provided in the lobby. They can serve more patrons in a safer way, doing curbside pickup and drop off. In Cupertino, as of today, there are 235 cases by zip code and 241 cases of COVID by city, an increase of about 60 cases since the last time I reported, so 2 weeks. It's quite an increase for us. There is another testing opportunity at the Senior Center tomorrow from 9:30 a.m. to 3:45. However, although all the appointments are filled, there's still room for some walk-ins. They always allow a little bit of room on a number of appointments they can accommodate for walk-in people. You do not need to be a senior to get tested. And as a reminder, the testing is for asymptomatic people. People with symptoms should see their care provider. A little more specific to Cupertino, we have some special events that are being planned for the holiday season, given the COVID posture. Something called Shine Bright Cupertino. These are all posted on the website. If not, they will be posted. Holiday house decorating event. Deck the Doors, hosted by Cupertino Cares, a door decorating contest where you'll need to submit a photo by a certain deadline. Holidays in Hawaii, December 9th, 1:30 to 3 p.m. Performances by, I'm sorry, my report's cut off. So
Oh, we lost you, Deb.
Hello?
Okay, there you are.
Yeah, I'm having also internet. Zoom with Santa, December 4th, 5th, 18th. I'm gonna lose my video to stabilize this a little bit. Hold on. Okay. Zoom with Santa, December 4th, 5th, 18th, and 10th from 4 to 8 p.m. There's some cash for reservations. Again, go to our website. And then lastly, the Santa Stop, December 11th and 12th from 5 to 7 p.m. All of these events are listed on our website and are a great way to celebrate the holidays in a safe way. I do want to make a couple of remarks given the state's or the county's statement about sports. We have observed a lot of field use in violation of the current orders. There's been a witnessing of adult cricket games that don't have any face coverings and are also not social distancing. And soccer is okay as well. However, games tend to be contact sports, so we are suggesting just to do soccer drills. And I remind people about those things because the county-wide task force that I've mentioned before went out this weekend during the long weekend and found 48% of all businesses were non-compliant, and they issued citations. The county task force is prepared to issue citations to both businesses and individuals. So I just implore that we all try to remain vigilant about face coverings and social distancing and large gatherings, contact sports, etc. This goes for our basketball courts at the various parks and all of that. And then I have a homeless encampment update. As of tonight, literally, there are 7 people who have taken housing at Abode's Casa de Novo. There were people taking the housing option as early as Friday, November 20th, when we started our outreach and engagement. There were a total of 9 new people not in the county's records as being unhoused. A number of them could qualify for other county programs and are being assessed as we speak. More people could take housing tomorrow, as well as for dates mapping out. Those that choose to remain outside can go to the temporarily sanctioned outdoor location established by the city, approximately located at the Valco Parkway and the Tantau intersection in a parking strip that we've set up for that purpose. There are city-provided facilities at that location, including porta potties, hand washing stations, and trash pickup. New equipment will be provided: tents, sleeping bags, gasoline cards, food cards. And the city, county, and Abode will facilitate the move to the other outdoor location. So if people have belongings that need to move to the other outdoor location, we will help them with that. Previously, I had reported that the Cupertino storage on Mary Avenue would house the encampment members' belongings. However, that changed during the week of Thanksgiving because it was not open during the week of Thanksgiving. So the new storage location is Storage Solutions, located at 570 Cinnabar Street, San Jose. It is closer to the Abode facility, so easier to access. Each person has their own locker. Location is, I'm sorry, I already mentioned it's closer to Casa de Novo. And then the items left behind after the cleanup, they will be stored at the Little Orchard Shelter, 2011 Little Orchard Street in San Jose. So those are the things left behind. So far, our unhoused residents that went to housing at Casa de Novo have actually participated moving their own things that are important to them to their storage units, and each one has their own storage unit. So that's also better for them. The agreement between the city and Abode is currently being worked. There's some other meetings to finalize some of the details, and I will provide a financial update as soon as possible on the $200,000 city contribution to this effort. I will definitely have more information towards the end of the week, and I would be happy to meet with our group of advocates either Friday or next Monday, or as time allows, if they have particular questions that I haven't answered today or would like particular information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deb. We are now on to report on committee assignments. I'll go first very quickly. On November 23rd, we had a VTA discussion with Supervisor Simidian regarding VTA's idea to delay all expenditures for the next 10 years on everything except BART to San Jose. I've never really seen Joe so upset, and which is a good thing. I also sent a letter from the city of Cupertino on the same subject that Mayor Paul helped to write. He wrote most of it, and that was sent to VTA. On November 25th at the West Valley Mayor's meeting, Vice Mayor Paul was selected unanimously as the VTA board member from the West Valley cities. The West Valley cities are Cupertino, Saratoga, Monte Sereno, Los Gatos, and Campbell. So congratulations to Vice Mayor Paul, I think, on that appointment. I also did send a letter as authorized by council at the last meeting to ABAG regarding the RENA distribution. I put a lot of work into that with a lot of data, especially on the various jobs housing balances of the different cities in the region. And that's all I have. Thank you. So Rob, would you like to go next?
Sure. Well, none of my city assignments, nothing happened in any of those, but I think it would be worthy here to report that at the Air District, we have been working for years on a consent decree with the EPA, the US EPA. All of the plants in the United States owned by Lehigh that make cement will now be subject to further regulation. This has dwelled through all of the Trump administration. It started back in the Obama administration, and because of particulate matter pollution that we are seeking to reduce, this settlement should substantially reduce the particulate matter emissions from our local plant. There's a special appendix with a test and set protocol to find how we reduce the condensable particulate matter and minimize it. So at this time, and for about the last 6 months, the cement plant has not been in operation. They're still required to determine the protocol and process whereby they will make this process happen, file regular reports with US EPA and the Air District. And at such time as they resume operation, the experimental protocol to figure out how to minimize pollution will be implemented, and that ought to inure to the benefit of all the residents in the South Bay, where the pollution largely lives. Not only here, but many adjacent places, and San Jose included. So I thought I'd let you know this. There will be I expect a press release coming out from the Air District tomorrow. We needed to digest what all happened and understand, in light of the fact that the plant is not in operation, what in fact are the effective dates given that. So we're preparing a FAQ and a press release, and I expect that if not tomorrow, it'll get out this week. But I wanted to let everybody know that good news. Thanks.
Hey, Darcy.
Yeah, great. Hello, thanks. So we did have a Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability Authority meeting, SVRIA, on the 19th. It was a Thursday. Not much to report out from there. There was a request from a federal jurisdiction to become a member of this communications network, which is primarily for law enforcement and public safety for Silicon Valley. And there was actually a really good suggestion by a board member, the representative from Sunnyvale, Russ Melton, to formulate a policy for these types of requests. And so that's what we decided to do. We tabled the request from the federal agency and put it to such a time when we have a policy for deciding who can join this network. And the actual communication system is the Silicon Valley Regional Communication System, or SVRCS. The other item that came from there is that a while back I had suggested on that board that SVRA come up with a video showing what they do, because they've basically onlined their entire antenna system now. So that's quite an accomplishment.
You delight to all residents.
Yeah, someone needs to.
Yeah, I muted. I don't know how that individual got unmuted.
Right. So, yeah. So I suggested that we come up with a video to show our residents what SVRA does, and they did make that. But unfortunately, it was done at the 49er Stadium, and they had some issues with permissions as to whether the team had been had granted access to or permission to show the to show the stadium itself in their video. So stay tuned on that. I'm happy to provide updates with regard to what they're doing, but I think they've successfully made a very important emergency and public safety communication system. And we're, essentially working out the contours of access to that system now. Thanks.
Great. Okay, Leon, go ahead.
Okay. So, hello, hi. So we had the 2x2 meeting with the CUSD, two CUSD board members. We talked about a few updates. So regarding Finch property, they have not ever had a discussion about that, but then most likely they might just consider leasing the property. And the board has not looked at any of their property as potential sale. One possibility is a property up on the former Montebello school. That might be a potential, but even that they have not had a discussion. However, as many people know, the board is looking into possibly closing schools due to financial constraints. Therefore, they are actively looking into a new parcel tax, likely will be in the May 2020 ballot. So they will finalize that decision in January. And the amount talked about in the last board meeting was about 500 per parcel to maybe 700 per parcel. And so any community members who would like to get regular updates from CUSD can subscribe to their newsletter and go to their homepage. Yeah, I think we talked about also possibly city offer some enrichment program for the CUSD, and that because the enrollment for city program at school site have been dropping, and now things are all remote, so that has all stopped. But there might be new opportunities that we could help to have online classes, but these are things that might be ongoing. Yeah.
That's it?
Okay, yeah.
All right, John, do you have anything?
Oh, yeah, I was at the same 2+2 meeting. I think Liang did a good job. It's just pretty important for us to help get the message out. You know, Prop 15 or Measure 15 failed, and it leaves CUSD really in a difficult bind funding-wise. And the study that they had started about possibly closing schools to address some of that funding shortfall really did not go over well with the community. And so anything we can do to help with this parcel tax thing going forward, we would try. Other item would be, we did have the housing subcommittee meeting on the 18th, and we're making, I think, pretty good progress. Progress is slow, but we do have the first draft. We saw the first draft of our inputs into a survey form. I think it needs to cover significantly more of the puzzle pieces for housing, but at least it's a start. We did already get feedback from some of the residents about what they see as challenges to these questions so that they're not misunderstood. So hopefully we'll get that before too long, because new projects are pretty much going to be focused on housing. And so we need to make sure we really do convey and assist to get the housing that the community wants. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Unmute myself. I do see one resident who wanted to comment on this agenda item, which is allowed. So go ahead, Rhoda. Rhoda, are you there? Maybe the hand was up for no reason. Okay. Rhoda, last chance. Okay. Rhoda's not speaking, so we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the consent calendar. I would pull item 8. and a motion for the others. However, we need to do item 7 separately, I believe. Is that true, Madam City Attorney?
I don't believe so anymore.
Oh, you don't? Oh, we don't have to. Okay.
Well, that's up to council members. But.
Okay. All right. So I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendars items 5, 6, 7, and 9. Or I will make the motion.
Okay, I'll
Second.
Okay. So can we have a vote on consent calendar except item 8?
Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember
Wait a
Smith,
minute, except 7 or 8, sorry.
I'm sorry, except.
you pulled
I
number
heard
8.
you say 7 and then I heard you say 8 at the
Number
end.
8. I thought 7, somebody would have to recuse themselves, but the city attorney said that she doesn't believe that's the case. So it was number 8 that I was pulling.
So you want to pull number 8?
Correct.
Okay. So the motion is 5, 6, 7, and 9, and
Correct.
I second. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, did Councilmember Chow, did you say aye?
Yes.
Councilmember Singh,
Yes?
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Sharp,
Aye.
motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so for item 8, the 5-year review of the impact fees, can we get that developer in lieu fee report, the staff report? Part A?
Hello, Mayor. And what is the question here?
Oh, I wanted to see the part of the, can you put the staff report up, the first part of it, item A, the in lieu fee report, the annual and 5-year. Do you have that available?
Second, while I pull that up. Okay. I'm not sure if I can share. I can.
Everyone should be able to share this here.
Share.
There you go.
Let's see, is it the right?
Just go to full screen.
And I'm not sure how to do full screen here.
That's okay. If you can just scroll down. Oh, yeah, let's, there you go. So,
which item in particular?
So I just wanted to see what the, maybe you don't have this here, what the Nexus study showed would be reasonable and what we are charging.
This is for which item?
Well, I was especially interested in parks and in transportation.
So.
And BMR. So.
And I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for here. I mean,
well, I mean, what I'm looking for is how much under the maximum have we set these fees?
I can't necessarily speak to the BMR item. That's a planning department fee, and they set. My understanding is those are set with the council input. I can't tell you where we're at with respect to standards there. With respect to the TIF, we have a new TIF fee that's coming to council. My understanding has been postponed to January. We postponed it earlier, and we'll be discussing fees there based on projects for the public, for transportation projects, I should say. And with respect to the park fees, they're based strictly on our our fee schedule. We have a fee schedule. I shouldn't say fee schedule. It's in the Muni Code. We have a factor that we multiply by. We base that on land values that are assessed on an annual basis. Those land values for the last couple of years have stayed steady at around $10 million an acre for land in Cupertino.
Okay, so here, I'll cut to the chase. How can we be adopting this when the transportation impact fee has been postponed until January?
And so basically, this is reporting on fees that we already have, basically funds that developers have already provided us in the past.
Okay, so this is just the 5-year report. This has nothing to do with going forward.
No, this is just a 5-year report on the fees that we've collected to date and how we plan to utilize those fees as we move forward.
Okay, all right, then I apologize. I should not have pulled this. So I will make a motion to adopt item 8 in the consent calendar.
I second.
Yeah, it's good for the public to know. I had the same question yesterday also, and the staff explained that. So this is the requirement, statutory requirement, that we specify how we are planning to use the mitigation fees, and we need to use them by a certain date. So all the fees collected are for a purpose. Yeah.
That is correct.
Do you vote yes?
We need to use them or program them.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry. Kirsten, go ahead.
Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember Sinks,
Yes.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Sharp.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so we are on to second reading of ordinances. This is the second reading of ordinance number 20-2216 to amend Cupertino Municipal Code Chapter 2.40 concerning the Disaster Council and Emergency Management Program. So, Madam City Clerk, can you conduct the second reading?
This is the second reading. Sorry?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. This is the second reading and enactment of ordinance number 20-2216, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino amending Cupertino Municipal Code Chapter 2.40 concerning the Disaster Council and the Emergency Management Program.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to enact this ordinance. Is there a
Second.
Okay,
Actually, Mr. Mayor, first, could you make a motion to read the title of the ordinance by title only?
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll make a motion to read the title of ordinance 202216 by title only, and that the city clerk's reading consists thereof. And can we do a combined motion and enact the ordinance 202216?
Sure. And who seconded that? I didn't catch that.
I don't know.
I did.
Oh,
Okay.
John?
okay, Councilmember Willie, thank you. Councilmember Chow,
Aye.
Councilmember Sinks,
Yes.
Councilmember Willie,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Paul,
Aye.
Mayor Sharp.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we're on to item 11, municipal code amendments to adopt glazing and lighting regulations to implement the fiscal year 2019 to 20 city council work program items related to dark sky and bird safe designs, application number MCA 2019-003 and MCA 2019-004. The applicant is City of Cupertino. So may we have the staff report, please?
Yes, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, City Manager, Ben Food, Director of Community Development. This item is part of the City Council Work Program. With us tonight, we have our planning team with us, Planning Manager Hugh Ghosh, as well as Senior Planner Eric Serrano. They'll be presenting you the information on this item. We've decided to keep these two items together because there are some overlapping areas in the regulation. This item has been heard by the Planning Commission on two separate public meetings, in addition to a separate study session in 2019. With that, I will hand this off to Hugh and Eric for the presentation, and we'll be happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll start the presentation.
Okay, everyone can see my screen okay?
Yes, thank you, Eric.
So this is, as Ben mentioned, this is part of the 1920 work program item. The city does not have bird safe or dark sky standards, but projects not exempt from CEQA are required to address bird strikes as part of the environmental review. So we do have several policies of the general plan supporting and protecting environmental resources and high quality design that kind of work for the basis of adoption of the bird safe standards. So why regulations? So light pollution in the dark sky. So the dark sky movement arose in the 1970s when you see light pollution occurring more as sprawl becomes a bigger issue here. And so several cities kind of have over the years enacted ordinances and policies to have dark sky standards. So cities like Portola Valley, City of Malibu, City of San Obispo. Our current regulations have more pertinent regulations for general commercial and parking areas. So like parking lots, sidewalks, and other areas accessible to pedestrians and automobiles. We do limit exterior lighting in those areas to be a white type and to minimize glare and to ensure there's an adequate intensity along the site. On the hillside, lighting essentially needs to meet a need. So, point towards the source and you'll see that come up more and more in the ordinance. Motion activated lights are not to exceed 100 watts. The code is silent on many other areas like residential, like single family duplexes, triplexes, mixed uses, and non-residential. So bird safe. So studies, really bird safe regulations intent is to help save birds. Studies suggest between 100 and 100 billion and 1 billion birds die every year from bird collision. They occur commonly because of the reflectivity of glass, and when they think the glass is a reflection of the outside, so they perceive that and think they can fly through or onto. There's also some overlap as well with lighting, so that they kind of fly towards the light. So birds really don't see glass as an obstacle; they just see it as another place so that they can fly to. So we see this happening more and more too, because building design trends, you see a lot more glass, a lot more transparency in buildings. And so strikes are starting to increase with that. Similarly to dark sky, several other cities have adopted ordinances for bird safe regulations. So you see cities like San Francisco, Alameda, Santa Cruz, Oakland, Sunnyvale, just some of the more local ones. So we did do outreach for this, including attending or conducting a study session with the Planning Commission. So we held that on the October 28th. So at that meeting, Planning Commission gave staff some direction, and staff worked with Planning Commission to set up a framework for the ordinance and take that to some of our community meetings, or the 2 community meetings that we held. So for the community meetings, we sent out citywide postcards. We had 2 meetings in February where we presented the same information just to ensure that there wasn't any difference of information to the public, and we made those materials available online as well in case anybody was unable to attend the meetings. We also did receive other comments that we captured in the Planning Commission meetings. Received through emails and phone calls and that kind of thing. So we initially took the proposed ordinance to the August 11th Planning Commission meeting. So one of there are several things that the Commission asked for us to reanalyze a bit more thoroughly. So part of that was the cost of applying the regulation. So what that would cost, glazing and motion sensor lights, that kind of thing. We also look at reducing the applicability of the bird safe treatment, exempting affordable housing and potentially exempting single family homes outside bird sensitive areas. There was also concerns about enforcing indoor lighting residential projects. And we also looked at outdoor lighting for late night activities. Outdoor seating, restaurants, that kind of thing. We did take the ordinance back on October 27th with some minor changes, which are reflected in the ordinance tonight for your consideration. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Pew.
Good evening, Council. I'm going to walk through the bird safe regulations. As Eric mentioned, bird safety essentially revolves around how reflective and how much glass you have in buildings and features. And so the whole purpose of these regulations is to reduce the bird building design elements and lighting features that are hazardous to the birds. And that way it would also help protect the natural environment. Next slide, please. Eric mentioned this already. Birds perceive exposed reflective glass as being as something that is not a barrier and they can fly through. And as a result, you have collisions. Glass can be of many different types, and reflective glass is one of those which will actually reflect all the landscaping and all the natural features that are around the building. And our ordinances encourage having landscaping around buildings and such, and therefore this is a problem in many communities, including ours. Next slide, please. Also, having large expanses of highly transparent glass is an issue. You can actually have glass features which are visible through and through, and again, birds perceive that as not being a barrier, and they're attempting to get from one side of that feature to the other. And as a result, there are bird strikes. Next slide. And finally, bright lighting. Usually birds, particularly ones that are migratory, they fly, and while they're flying, they do get attracted by bright lighting, particularly if it's concentrated in one area. And as a result, they have fatigue while they're migrating, and they just get confused about where they are and end up dying in scores. Next slide. So the whole intent of the regulations is to control those three things: to avoid transparent glass, to avoid large expanses of glass, and to control the lighting. We looked at several cities that have bird safe policies and ordinances. They include San Francisco, Toronto, Portland, Alameda, Santa Cruz, Oakland, and Sunnyvale locally. And that a comparison of their regulations is included with the packet. Next slide. So the regulations that we proposed in the draft ordinance are culled from the various ordinances that we looked at. These are certain bird safe solutions that are available in order to ensure that birds don't perceive the glass as being transparent and try to fly through them. There are many things that people can do that includes texturing, fritting, putting external coverings on buildings. Essentially, they can function as artwork, scrolls, etc., louvers. So there's many techniques that people can use in order to avoid bird strikes. Next slide. It is proposed that bird safe regulations be applied to all new or remodel of primary and accessory buildings, replacement of glass windows and features, and whenever one applies for a building permit or has a permit attached to a development project. Next slide, please. There were certain exemptions that were proposed in the preliminary version of the ordinance, which include historic structures, first floor commercial storefronts up to a height of 15 feet to make the commercial storefronts competitive. In addition to those two items, the Planning Commission added a couple with their comments, and that included residential development in R1 zoning districts outside of defined bird-sensitive areas. Bird-sensitive areas are areas that are within 300 feet of the wildlife-urban interface in the residential hillside zones, within 300 feet of water courses and things that are natural features already that are attractive to birds. And additionally, also, the Commission was concerned about 100% affordable housing developments being burdened with implementing bird safe treatments. Next slide. In general, the standards that are proposed would apply to the entire facade of a building. So no more than 10% of the facade would be untreated glass between the ground and 60 feet above that. And no more than 5% of any building or facade would be untreated 60 feet above the ground. So those are, in essence, the gist of the regulations that are being applied for bird safety. Next slide. There are multiple things people can do to comply with these regulations. They could place window muntins. They could add fritten. They could have exterior insect screens. They could have louvers. There's also an alternative compliance method built into the ordinance to ensure that if a qualified biologist, if somebody wants to propose an alternative solution, a qualified biologist can recommend that, and that can be approved by the director or the approval body of that particular permit. Next slide. In terms of bird safe lighting, the original requirements were to apply to both residential and non-residential buildings, but with input from the Planning Commission, this was changed to only be applicable to non-residential projects. So it was updated, and therefore indoor lighting is only regulated in non-residential projects. They would require time switch control devices and automatic occupancy sensors. And it would be required that the indoor lighting be turned off by 11 p.m. or 2 hours after the close of business of any business, in essence. Next slide. There are also certain site planning and building design features or that can be done in order to ensure that there is bird safety. There's certain guidelines with regard to that. So it is recommended that when in site planning or building design that the planner or the architect avoid funneling flight paths towards the building facade, that they avoid the use of highly reflective glass or highly transparent glass. And then in addition, there's a requirement that glass features such as walkways, glass walkways and things like that, transparent building corners, things that birds don't see as barriers are not built into the project. That is another requirement. Next slide. So at this point, I'm wondering whether we should stop or we can continue our presentation. And Eric will continue the presentation from this point forward if the council wishes to move forward.
Yeah, why don't you finish and then we'll take public comment and then we'll bring it back to council.
Certainly. And with that, I'll hand it over to Eric to continue the presentation. Thank you.
Everyone just write down your questions so we can do that.
Going into the dark sky regulations, so we do have applicability for the outdoor lighting. So anytime a building permit, electrical permit for outdoor lighting or signages require new or replacement lighting or development permit. We also are proposing a modification to that language as well, where it would read that whenever an applicant is required to obtain a building permit, a permit pursuant to Title 19, which is our zoning ordinance, or whenever lighting is added or replaced, whether temporary or permanent. So this is to ensure that all new lighting fixtures are consistent with the ordinance. For submission requirements, we would require a site plan with all outdoor lighting fixtures, a description of each lighting fixture, so like a spec sheet, image, something like that. Photometric plans, which essentially show the detailing of the illumination throughout the site, which can be waived by the director should they be able to determine that the lighting thresholds are being met. And we were thinking more of this applying to our single family residences, duplexes, triplexes, the smaller types of developments where we don't want this to be a burden on them. So one of the big things about outdoor lighting is that it should be shielded and directed. So that's what we've incorporated in our ordinance. We wanted to keep the light away from adjacent properties and in the city's right of way. We do have an exception built in for low voltage landscape lighting, special architectural features, public art, and historic lighting fixtures. So illumination levels, existing standards. So no lighting can exceed 1 foot candle to an adjacent property to avoid that spillover. No direct off-site glare from a light source shall be visible above 3 foot at the public right of way. The maximum lighting intensity shall not exceed a maintained 10-foot candle when measured at finish grade. We've also looked at the lighting color to be less than 3000 Kelvin. We've also looked at outdoor lighting. So given direction from the Planning Commission, we updated the ordinance to allow for outdoor lighting to go past 11 p.m. when it's in conjunction with a permit to extend that use. We also include automated control systems, so use for outdoor lighting when sufficient daylight is available, would essentially have them turn off. And they would, so if you had motion sensor lights, those can turn on, but those would be required to turn off after 10 minutes from activation. And all these lighting systems are to have a battery backup in case electricity or there's some sort of malfunction to it. For lighting design standards, the lighting fixtures must be in a design that complements the building and landscaping and scalable to the use. So no need for a 20-foot light in the middle of nowhere. That's not lighting anything. Security lighting, so shall be controlled by a programmable motion sensor device except for required by building code. No floodlights, and again, motion activated, and this would not also this would be limited to 100 watts. We also did built-in critical areas of illumination to avoid any conflict with the building code. There's some areas like stairwells and pathways, and I think even ATM machines that need a little extra light to make sure everyone can get in and out, safely and cleanly. We have prohibited several types of lighting, so outdoor lighting that blinks, flashes, or rotates, floodlights that present above the horizontal plane, lighting that unnecessarily illuminates any other lot or substantially interferes with the enjoyment of that lot, high-intensity discharge lighting for recreation courts or private sports courts, and spotlights. We've also built in multiple exemptions. So exceptions include lighting within the public right-of-way and public parks, permitted lighting for signs, that's taken care of in our sign ordinance, lighting to illuminate address signs, temporary construction or emergency lighting, short-term lighting authorized by special events permit, holiday seasonal lighting, and lighting required by the building code or state law. One of the items that the Planning Commission did ask for us to look at was permanent string lighting. So we looked at several different ordinances that allowed this lighting to occur. So when you see string lightings, a lot of time people defer to seasonal lightings. And so when we did see instances, it normally occurred in commercial and non-residential areas with wattage limitations and very specific areas to be lit. So we did draft additional language that was included as an attachment to allow for permanent exposed string lights. We would still prohibit blinking and or chasing lights that are permanently installed. Lighting would be prohibited from being attached to fences. The idea there is just to avoid that spillover to adjacent properties. And then if it were to be secured to any landscaping, essentially affixed so that it doesn't damage the lighting. We do have different requirements for commercial and residential lighting as well. So the project is exempt from CEQA from these provisions. So 15308 being adopted to ensure maintenance, restoration, enhancement, or protection of the environment. 15301 regulations would not result in any expansion of use. 15305 minor alteration of land use alterations that do not alter permitted uses or density. 15061B3 where it can be seen with certainty that the proposed regulation will have no possible significant effect on the environment. 15300.2 that none of the CEQA exemptions apply to the proposed ordinance. In addition to the outreach that we mentioned earlier, we did the legal ad, display ad, and posted on the city's bulletin board and the city's website. Here is our recommended action to find the action exempt from CEQA and amend the municipal code by adding a new chapter and amending the following chapters to adopt the glazing and lighting regulations to implement bird safe design and dark sky goals. We do recommend some additional language, which I have included here to the applicability section of the ordinance. That's the very top of the ordinance. And that concludes my presentation, or our presentation.
All right, thank you. So before we bring it back to council, we'll go to public comment here. I have 2 hands raised, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. First is Jill Halloran. Everyone gets 3 minutes and you will be cut off after 3 minutes. So watch the timer. Welcome, Jill.
Hello, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, hi. I just really have a general comment that I just think bird safe design is really very important. And building, I really think we need to take that into consideration. Dark skies, bird safe design. That's my general comment. I'm not very eloquent. Sorry about that. So I'll yield my time to the next person.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Shawnee Kleinhouse, welcome.
Good evening again, Mayor Scharf and Council. My name is Shawnee Kleinhouse. I'm the environmental advocate for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society and have been advocating for these two ordinances for a long time. I want to thank staff for all their work on that, including staff who has left the city, unfortunately. We really want to see this move forward tonight. We sent you a letter with a few, some of them are really minor suggestions for improvements and hoping that you will look at them. One of them was to add human health to the purpose statement because there is so much evidence that shows these days just how harmful light pollution is to human health, from obesity to diabetes to cancers and children growth. So just add those words, human health. We were hoping that for the bird safe design, you specify that the treatments need to be visible to all birds and have contrast, because we've seen many products out there that do not have enough contrast and are not effective. And so it's important, or not visible by all bird species. So that's a small amendment. I understand that you want to keep the additional lighting on staircases, but maybe it needs to be somewhat limited and not completely unspecified. And last thing is that we keep on top of all the new innovations. We keep in touch with companies. We keep in touch with the other organizations, countrywide, that are working on it. So we know a lot about what works and what's not. So hopefully staff would work with us, and maybe you can direct them to work with us on what should be on the list of acceptable designs. We've been very supportive of being flexible, but we want to see that it's also effective. And the last one was the color temperature. This comes from a group that has been working on it for a long time and working with neurosensitive people and showing that above 2700 Kelvin, there are, it causes anxiety to a lot of people. Some of us have children with these kind of problems and know just how easily it is for them to get distracted or anxious. And apparently light, just like with other health effects, has a role in that kind of reaction. Overall, we hope you move it forward tonight, both of those. I really, again, want to thank staff. And Ellen Yao, before she left, asked me to be available for questions. So if you have any questions, I'm really happy to answer on the bird safe design. And thank you. This is wonderful. It's visionary, it's leadership as it should be, and it shows true leadership.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? This is Connie Cunningham.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we hear you. Sorry, I was muted.
Okay, I couldn't hear you. I guess that's the problem. Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council members again. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I am Connie Cunningham, and I have lived in Cupertino for 33 years. I'm a Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society member. Cupertino has been a leader on the behalf of the environment in many ways. These regulations are a natural fit with that leadership. I commend city staff, Ellen Yao, Eric Serrano, and Piu Ghosh for efforts on behalf of all of us and their excellent report. These regulations will be effective in reducing harmful effects of glass and lighting. I am speaking to support the city's implementation of dark sky and bird safe design municipal ordinances. These changes will not only protect the birds in our city that bring joy and life to residents, but will also protect all humans, since light pollution is detrimental to us as well as wildlife. I have over 30 photos of birds who live in my neighborhood that live and raise their families among us. Some are year-round, some migrate with the seasons. And Kirsten is being kind enough to show 5 of the birds that I have taken pictures of in my neighborhood. So you can enjoy them there. As a resident who enjoys birds and bird watching, I share with many residents the desire to protect wild birds since they cannot protect themselves from human impacts. Why I care. Hundreds of thousands of migratory birds collide with windows every year, including cedar waxwings, American robins, yellow-rumped warblers, crowned sparrows, and ruby-crowned kinglets. 5 of those birds are being pictured here. These are all birds you can see in my neighborhood, and they're pictures that I have taken. During the early COVID pandemic, I posted a different wild bird species each day to Nextdoor, and many, many people responded with stories of their own about the wild birds in their yards. This sharing of nature benefited all of us at a very difficult time. Another reason why I care. Light pollution gets worse every year. It affects the biology and health of humans as well as all living things. In birds, this also interferes with migration. They are distracted by artificial light from their natural light patterns. I urge you to support Cupertino and take the recommended actions, find the actions exempt from CEQA, and amend the municipal code as specified in the report. Thank you for this time to speak on behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves.
Okay, thank you, Connie. Next, we have Rose Grimes. Welcome, Rose.
Yeah, hi. Actually, it's Peter Friedland.
Okay.
Rose's husband. Just wanted to make a very quick comment in support of the motion, something that I haven't seen mentioned yet. It turns out one side effect of us all being stuck at home for the last 9 months is that there's been an enormous explosion of amateur astronomy. In fact, if one tries to order a reasonably decent telescope for any of the major manufacturers, there's at least a 1-month backlog in getting anything. So anything that reduces light pollution, particularly in the evening hours, I think greatly supports people who are pursuing that particular hobby. And as I said, it seems to have exploded recently, especially from those of us who haven't done anything in terms of backyard astronomy since we were a Boy Scout, but now are rediscovering that hobby. So just wanted to say, as a side effect of the laudable goal of protecting wildlife, you're also going to make a bunch of people who are adopting that hobby very happy.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Lisa Karpinski. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, I have grown up, I actually was born in 1962 and grew up in Sunnyvale, Cupertino, went to Homestead High School, Cupertino Junior High. So I've been watching the state of birds and the dark sky my entire life. I have to say that I remember times where I could actually see, there were a few nights where I saw the Milky Way as a child. And I wanted to really thank the council for considering both of these measures, just literally to set a precedent, because I think it's so critical. And I appreciate that Sunnyvale and Santa Cruz and Oakland and some other local cities have taken measures in this area. I just think more and more that humans are going to be looking for that we benefit from the aesthetic value of nature, and which includes dark sky. And as Shawnee pointed out, I really think that the human effects of light pollution are very real, and I personally suffer from them, including the melatonin impacts. I really appreciate the fact that there is a valuing of birds, and that the council is looking to actually prioritize saving bird lives. I want to point out that recent studies have found that we've had a 3 billion drop in bird count in North America since 1970, which is a decline of 29%. Now, of course, that a lot of that's habitat loss, but bird strikes are a very significant part of that number. And I think that anything that any city does in that regard is not only good for the ecosystem, but that because we live in the ecosystem, it's good for humans. As one of the previous speakers was pointing out about posting about birds, I think that we forget the importance of the value of nature in our lives. And I wanted, I also wanted to say I have worked with Shawnee in Audubon in the past and continue to do so, and would point you to the letter that she wrote with Sierra Club. There were a couple of other points that weren't discussed that she didn't have time to bring up regarding the extra lighting of certain areas, which what she argued in the letter might be too much, about loopholes allowing lighting of unlimited brightness, number 3 in her letter. And I would also point you to number 5, directing staff to work with Audubon Society to create and annually review the list of bird safe treatments so that, you know, we can stay abreast. And as she said, you know, we're constantly looking at.
Okay, next is Mike Rohde. Welcome, Mike. Mike, go ahead. Let me unmute you again.
There we go.
All right, go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, I'd like to talk about the retail aspect of the dark sky. You know, we feel that the ordinance poses a large risk to the retail environment at this point. Not only retail, restaurants and local businesses that are established throughout the city of Cupertino. And quite honestly, the community meetings were happened prior to COVID, which seems like a different era at this point. So I think that, you know, a lot of retail has kind of fallen off the cliff at this point, and putting this undue burden on them is even more difficult. So, and by burden, I'm talking about, you know, lighting restrictions. We're really focused on trying to make a retail environment really active and vibrant and fun for the patron. And having a dark retailer really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it gives that poor illusion that that the retail aspect is not doing well. And you know, we've seen that sort of thing with unchanging times at Valco, and of course at Main Street. You know, our retailers are poised to kind of pull through this, but we really don't want to put that unfair burden on them to, you know, reduce their lighting capacity, have their exterior lighting reduced. And, you know, most people would much rather go to a well-lit shopping center or well-lit parking lot as opposed to a poorly lit business. So we would like for you to consider that and consider what that does for the retailers. And also the security and safety aspects are a bit challenging, and it doesn't really depict what sort of security and lighting you can do on that. And so we think that we need to take more time for that. We'd like for you to consider postponing this and trying to do more community input and have a conversation with some of your key retailers in the city of Cupertino and see what kind of devastating effects that they've already experienced through COVID and what sort of limitations they're going to have with this sort of thing as we move forward. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Next is Greg Whitney. Welcome, Greg. Try unmuting you again. Okay. Greg, are you there? You need to also unmute yourself. Okay, all right, hold on.
I'm trying.
Okay, there you go. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, council members. My name is Greg Whitney, and I'll say nobody enjoys a dark starlit sky more than I do. But I'd like to echo some of Mike's comments. I think that, I would also urge you to look at this dark sky ordinance before you adopt it, because I do think it poses some risk to the vitality of your retail and restaurant environment in Cupertino, and potentially places some significant impacts in their ability to operate. If you look what has happened through COVID, in the increase in outside dining, patio dining, those areas being, warmly lit and enhancing the restaurant's ability to do business in a very difficult time. I think it's been something that has been, kept a lot of the restaurants in business, quite honestly, and it's been something that I think patrons have really enjoyed, to be out in the outside environments and dining. And so I think that some of these restrictions potentially place that in jeopardy. And I think that you should be looking potentially at how this does impact restaurants and retails in your shopping center. I also think that you've got to take it into consideration, how competitive you are with your sister cities. If you look at your neighboring cities, properties like Santana Row or Stanford Court, patrons are going to naturally gravitate to an area that feels good, is receptive, is lit, is vibrant, and again, I think that you wouldn't want this dark sky ordinance to impact those things in the city of Cupertino. I agree with Mike on some of the safety issues. Having centers that are well lit are important to the safety of customers. It makes them feel good. Lastly, I think the last thing you want in the shopping center is to be looking at some businesses that are open later, restaurants, theaters, some of the entertainment venues like bowling alleys, and have areas of the shopping center that are dark or unlit, making them look like uninviting. I think retailers are going to have a problem with them not being able to showcase their inventories and whatnot. And so I think that, again, I just urge the city to really look at this ordinance and how it impacts restaurant and retail in your commercial properties before you adopt it. Thank you.
We unmute. Next, we have Jean Bedord. Welcome, Jean. I'll try this again. Jean,
Thank
are
you.
there? Go ahead. Okay.
This is Jean Bedord, and I am a longtime Cupertino resident. I attended the community meetings as well as the Planning Commission meeting on these two policies. I have to say the bird safe policies seem to be reasonable and make a lot of sense, particularly for new construction or remodeling and renovating and those sorts of activities. However, I have some concerns about the dark sky policies. First of all, it's not clear to me whether these would apply to existing structures and existing lighting that is part of a business or a residence. And if it does apply to existing structures, is this an implied tax on that particular activity in addition to all of the other fees that go on? Secondly, I would like to know more about the impact on Main Street and Valco. And in particular, I happen to like the lighting, the year-round lighting that is there at Main Street. And I would like to know whether that would be impacted. We are in a situation where we're trying to create an area within the city that is attractive to our younger adults. And you know what? They like to stay out until 1 or 2 in the morning. They like to have activities that are going on. Whereas I'm looking at this and going, are you over-regulating the type of commercial activity that we need in our city? And I have to say, in going to all of these meetings, I did not hear a single voice from a commercial enterprise. And I think you need to take that into consideration as you look at these dark sky lighting regulations. There may be some unintended consequences of being overzealous about regulating. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Next is Daschle Leeds. Welcome.
Hello. Hello
We hear
again,
you.
actually. My name is Daschle Williams. I'm the Conservation Assistant for the Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter. We're in strong support of the ordinance tonight. We co-authored a letter with the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, which speakers have already referenced. I won't go too much into our requests, but above all, I hope you pass the ordinance tonight. And if you can motion to make some of the requests, that's great. But I think moving forward would be paramount. We linked to a study in our letter, and I want to read an excerpt from it. And the study is called "Electrical Light, particularly at Night, Disrupts Human Circadian Rhythmicity. Is that a problem?" And I'll read a paragraph here. "Excessive lighting of the night sky is important an Earth issue as climate change. The impact on life, including plant, insect, and animal, is now beginning to be appreciated at large. Disruption of circadian rhythmicity has profound effects on physiology, many aspects of which are deleterious." And I'll end there, but it goes into describing how this can affect small children. So we are looking at a global phenomenon that disrupts the very core of how we've evolved biologically as living beings. And the circadian rhythm is pretty much near universal among all living things. So this cumulatively is a very significant issue. And, from this perspective, looking back at the ordinance, I think it's really quite reasonable what staff has proposed here. I think there are a lot of really great exemptions, such as, allowing businesses to keep their lights on until their hours of operation end, for example, allowing exemptions for security lighting, like 100-watt security lighting, which 100 watts is incredibly bright. I can't think of a good way to describe it, but I think it is, if I remember correctly, 1,000 times brighter than the light of the full moon. And sorry, no, even more than that. So I think if security is a concern, if visibility is a concern, I think the ordinance is currently written allows for the flexibility for hours of operation, and for security purposes, I think honestly an excessive amount of lighting is currently allowed. So given the scope of this issue that we're facing and the scientific consensus that's emerged from it, I think this is overall a really reasonable request to be asking. And I would just really encourage you, particularly with the bird safe design portion, to work with the Audubon Society. You have a really great local organization here that has true expertise, especially when it comes to bird safe design. So I think they can be of much help to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Rhoda Fry. Welcome, Rhoda.
Hi, this is Rhoda Fry. I'm a 37-year resident of Cupertino, and I want to thank staff for their efforts on this ordinance. And I echo Shawnee Kleinhouse and Daschle Leeds' commentary. Let's do whatever we can to protect human health, our feathered friends, and other wildlife. Thank you very much. Good night.
Okay, thank you, Rhoda, for being so brief. Next, we have Anjali Kauser. Welcome, Anjali. Go ahead, Anjali.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Anjali Kauser, CEO for the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce. And I first of all wanted to thank the staff for their report and recommendation on the dark sky and bird safe ordinance. However, I would also like to suggest that we need to reach out to our small businesses as it's going to impact them the most. And we have not done a direct reach out to the businesses. Yes, you've had a couple of community outreach, but I do not recall any small businesses being involved in those outreach. So I would strongly recommend if you could please send this back and ask the staff to reach out to the business community. And the chamber is here to support you and support the staff to get that information and outreach done. And then we can come back and you can make the decision on how it would best impact the businesses and the city and the health and decrease our light pollution and be safe for bird safety. So again, I would really ask the council to today please move this, not to move this forward, but to ask the staff to please go ahead and get some input from the business community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anjali. Next, we have Rose Friedland. Welcome, Rose.
Hi.
We hear you. Yes.
So this is Rose Friedland, the other half of Peter Friedland, and otherwise Rose Grimes. So I logged in on 2 devices. I certainly endorse the comments that others of my colleagues, Connie Cunningham, Lisa Karpinski, Shawnee Kleinhouse, and Daschle have made. I'm not an expert in bird watching to the level that they are, but I'm certainly a generic bird enjoyer. And beyond appreciating how the birds are harbingers of environmental health and environmental change, I'm certainly an enjoyer of individual birds when I have the opportunity to encounter them. So I very much support the bird safe design. I also want to commend staff, as some of the other commenters have mentioned. I also participated in the community outreach meetings and in both of the Planning Commission virtual meetings. So pre-COVID, when we were able to get together in community meetings, and post-COVID, when we were getting together by Zoom and working with the Planning Commission. So I've observed how staff and the Planning Commission have worked together to try and delve into and improve both the bird safe and the dark skies regulations. I really commend all of those organizations for considering their impact on residential, on residences and residential citizens, as well as on businesses, which they've undertaken and discussed at length in all of their meetings. And in terms of the dark skies, you've already heard from an amateur astronomer, and I certainly endorse the comments of folks who attach this also to human health and circadian rhythms. And I think that what the staff and the Planning Commission have recommended in terms of what can be, what is retroactive, how businesses and homes can replace existing fixtures in a way that's exempted from the regulation, but also how they've taken into account safety and other elements of making lighting attractive for both businesses and for citizens, and attractive in the residential areas. I think they've really done a good job at evaluating all of the trade-offs and recommending to City Council a very smart compromise that's also very forward-looking. So I endorse the staff's recommendation and also the submission that you received from the Audubon Society. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Okay, thank you, Rose. Next, we have Kitty Moore. Welcome, Kitty.
Good evening, Mayor Sharp. And I really want to thank Rose for her comments regarding the Planning Commission efforts. I am speaking representing myself only. I'm just glancing at the string lighting regulations. This was bad because I too, the string lighting, which is at Main Street, and I wanted to see that would be able to continue. Additionally, there are people who have string lighting in their yards, and the way the regulation was written previously, they wouldn't be able to keep it up year round. So I wanted to see if that could happen. And I see that they added 19.102.040B12, the string lighting regulations. My only concern that I see is item 2, installed or attached to fences, because you could have individual, homeowners or that are attaching their string lighting to their fences to illuminate a courtyard area. I know that some in my neighborhood are doing this, in fact. So I would like to see that removed. Other than that, this looks like it was well crafted, this portion on the string lighting. And I'm trying to see if there's anything else. I would think that there's a way that staff could address the concerns about the commercial area from the owners, because we went over that pretty thoroughly, and I believe that Eric and Pugh can give them the information that they're looking for on that. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kitty. That ends the public comment. There's no more hands raised, so we will bring it back to council. You know, we've been going for 3 hours now, so before we have council comments, why don't we take a little break, 5 minutes till 8:35.